Dickens led such an action-packed life, and it's a familiar life to lots of people, so I'll try and skim along. He had this famously rackety childhood, sort of the lower end of the middle class, ended up working in the blacking factory, a traumatic childhood experience, which was later recapitulated in David Copperfield. He became a journalist after a few detours. He wrote his sketches by Boz, which were collected in 1836. And this began a really wonderful and rather staggering decade or more of achievement, beginning with the Pickwick Papers, taking in Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, The Old Curiosity Shop, Barnaby Rudge, Martin Chuzzlewit, The Christmas Carol, Dombey and Son. That's all between 1837 and 1848. Critics tend to see this as a bit of a turning point, with Dombey and Son ushering in a new era where he moves away from the more picaresque Fielding and Smollett-influenced era of his youth towards more carefully planned novels that have more elaborate plots, are more deliberately, concentratedly making various forms of social critique. I think we can see that as a response to the mid-Victorian moment. I mean, I don't think it's coincidental we have this shift around 1848 because we're moving into this age of boom, the railways, the banks, and this sense of settled complacency about Britain's place in the world and its grandeur and success and achievement, which Dickens was pretty keen to undermine in various ways. So we then have this sort of second era of Dickens's career: David Copperfield, Bleak House, Hard Times, Little Dorrit, The Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations. They were both published in weekly serial in his new magazine all the year round. He finished Great Expectations in 1861, and he didn't begin Our Mutual Friend for 2 years, which for him was quite an unusual gap. I think there are various reasons for this. He'd had this famous personal crisis, very public personal crisis, in 1858 when he separated from his wife and felt he had to explain this to the public, including publishing his explanation in his own magazine. That same year, perhaps not coincidentally, he'd also began his great series of public readings, for the first time reading from his books professionally for paying audiences. And this was an incredibly intensive process. It wasn't at all that he was simply opening his books and reading from the pages. He was shaping new texts that were particularly crafted for public audiences. So it was a very intensive process, and the performances were very acted. They were real performances, and they took a lot out of him, particularly because his health was bad by this point in his life. He had an exhausting social life. He was editing his magazines. He was very involved in various charitable endeavours. Around the same time, his mother died. His son, Walter, died. Another relevant thing, I think, particularly for Our Mutual Friend, that he had sold his house, Tavistock House, in 1860 to a Jewish couple, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, and they had become friendly afterwards, and Mrs. Eliza Davis complained about his portrayal of Fagin in Oliver Twist, suggesting that it reinforced negative stereotypes about Jewish people. Perhaps it was because he's performing as Fagin in public. Perhaps this has brought the character back into the public domain in a particularly pointed way. Dickens was very shocked by this allegation. He was upset that he could be seen to be enforcing a stereotype, and so he developed the character of Mr. Rhea in Our Mutual Friend, who plays an important role, a rather saintly character. He found the going quite hard on Our Mutual Friend once he had begun in October 63. It was going to be published in 19 serial instalments, and he waited until he had 5 already written before he began publishing it in serial, hoping that he could get ahead of the publishing schedule. In the end, he ended up in his familiar position of being only 1 ahead of the publisher, which was rather stressful for him. And if that wasn't enough, shortly before finishing the book, he was involved in a terrible railway accident, the Staplehurst rail disaster, in which I think 11 people were killed. Really awful accident. He was very involved in helping people and pulling people from the wreckage. And not only did he pull people from the wreckage, but he pulled the manuscript of Our Mutual Friend. I think it was part 16. So we were lucky to have him and to have Bella Wilfer's wedding, thanks to his survival. And it was his last completed book, finished in 1865.